Do you think Anna Karenina is too long? Then you should read Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. And one question before we get to the review. Did I enjoy this read? And the answer is, kinda. Welcome to Whiskey and Literature. I'm your host, Captain Mike, and I'm reading and reviewing 52 books in 52 weeks in 2023. This is my 41st book review of the year so far, Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. And before we get to the book, let's talk about the author briefly. Gustave Flaubert. He was a French novelist born in 1821, died in 1880. He liked prostitutes, didn't want to have kids, and was a pantheist. He was a slow writer, striving for perfection, always trying to find the right word, and never satisfied with his work. We today tend to take for granted the style of novels that we read. Once in a while in the past, there was an author who took a chance. He blazed new trails, and Gustave Flaubert was one of these pioneers. Writing a realist novel was revolutionary. The stark depictions of life and love were part of the reason this novel was considered obscene when it was first released. Okay, on to the specs and stats of Madame Bovary. This was first published in serial format in 1856, released in 2 volumes in 1857, and it was deemed obscene, and the publisher and Flaubert were brought to trial and acquitted, and it became a bestseller after that. My copy of the book I bought from Amazon, and it's not a very good printing. 190 pages and reads like a 300-page novel. This literally doesn't even have the translator listed on the book. My recommendation is not to buy the cheapest books on Amazon. Do your due diligence and find one that has a reputable translator. I bought 50 books in about a 2-week time span preparing myself for this year's reading, and I definitely made some mistakes. I bought some books that were poorly translated and printed. I did listen to most of this book on Audible, and I read the last couple chapters in print format. The Audible version was translated by Lydia Davis and read by Kate Reading. And Lydia Davis also translated the #1 greatest book of all time as determined by an algorithm. And Kate Reading was a pretty good narrator. In fact, she's narrated quite a few books on Audible, including some of my favorite books of all time by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. And fun fact, her husband also is one of the main narrators for the Wheel of Time series and Brandon Sanderson's books. Okay, let's talk about the style of Madame Bovary. Literary realism, attempting to depict a subject truthfully. No speculative fiction or supernatural elements. We take this for granted these days, but this was groundbreaking in 1856. Flaubert, through Emma, mocked the Romantic movement. This book also takes on the bourgeoisie, their indolent, dissipated, shallow, and mindless culture. I'm not putting this book at all in the romantic genre. Literary realism, and it's a tragedy. Okay, on to the plot. Charles is a country doctor, and he marries a widow that his mother chooses for him. Kind of weird. And then she dies. He meets the daughter of one of his patients, and they fall in love and get married. Her name is Emma. And Emma likes to read novels and isn't 100% content with her domestic life, but she does okay until they are invited to a party, a ball, at the house of a marquis. After all of the excitement, when they return home, she finds their life dull in comparison. Charles, he really loves his wife, and he moves his practice to a larger town, hoping maybe the change of scenery would perk her up. They have a baby girl, Birth. Emma meets a law student, Léon, and they share an interest in literature and music. They become infatuated with each other, but nothing really happens, and Léon, he leaves. Rodolphe, he brings one of his servants to see the doctor. He sees the doctor's wife, and he decides that she would be an easy lay. So he sets out to seduce her with empty platitudes. They have an affair. Charles doesn't know. She falls in love with him. Rodolphe is having a good time. Emma, after a couple of years of this affair going on, she wants to run away with Rodolphe. But Rodolphe breaks up with her via a letter delivered in a basket of apricots. Emma goes into a coma. Then she wakes up, and then she attempts to buy her way into happiness. The problem is her purchasing quickly outstrips her husband's earning power. Eventually, she becomes so heavily indebted, the only way out is for her to eat arsenic. Charles, he's sad that she's dead, and he imitates her spending habits to try and keep her memory alive until he comes across her love letters. And then he also commits suicide. Their daughter goes to live with her grandmother, who also dies. So then she's sent to live with her poor aunt, who sends her to the cotton factory as child labor. Okay, so did that sound depressing? Yeah, not a super happy novel ending. You know what I was thinking as I was reading this book? It's half of Anna Karenina. Now stick with me here. We have a wife with a daughter. She's not happy in her life or with her husband. A wealthy rake seduces her. They have an affair. They come to find out it's not all happiness and bliss. She is more into him than he is into her. He leaves her. She commits suicide. Now, there are some differences in those two plot lines, but it's kind of the same thing. However, Anna Karenina, it delivers the sweet with the sour. Madame Bovary is just all sour. We don't have the love story of Lennon and Kitty to balance out the tragedy with Madame Bovary and Rodolphe. Could we have Anna Karenina without Madame Bovary? This was one of those groundbreaking novels that set the standard. Perhaps not the first realist type novel, but maybe the first best one? And I don't know if all the authors back in these days thought that women were actually the weaker sex, but they certainly seemed to write them that way, often given to hysterics and fainting spells, etc. There were villains in the book, Rodolphe and Leroux. All the characters in the book were very well written. Charles, his bumbling, blind devotion. Emma's naive romanticism yearning for more. Rodolphe and Léon's calculated seductions. And Leroux's feigned helpfulness turning to greed. One thing I didn't mention earlier was the idea of contentedness. Always wanting to have more. The next purchase will bring me happiness. Fulfill my life. And this is current and immediate. I often find myself falling into this same trap, especially when I'm watching TV and they have the commercials, or I'm at someone's house that has more than me. And I'm not railing against bettering oneself, more the idea of living beyond one's immediate means. I don't believe much in the Bible, but the debtor is slave to the lender. I do believe that. Again, I am reading the 50 greatest books of all time as determined by an algorithm. And this one is number 9 on the list. It's in the top 10 greatest books of all time. If I were making my own list of the top 10 greatest books, I'm not sure this would be in the top 10, but I think it does deserve to be in the top 50. And I'm glad I've read it. And if you haven't, I think that you should. All right, guys, on to the star rating. And I judge all my books on 5 criteria, 6 if I listen to it on Audible. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comment section below. Initial response. How do I feel as soon as I have finished the book? It got a 3. Recommendation. How likely am I to recommend the book? And I gave it a 4. Style. Did I enjoy the writing style? 5. Let's see, plot structure. How engaged was I in the story? And I gave it a 4. Characters. Were they relatable, believable, engaging? Also got it a 5. And Audible. For those books that I listened to on Audible, how was the production? And I think the narrator did a great job. It got a 5. Okay, so that's 26. And 26 divided by 6 is 4.33 stars for Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I think that's a pretty good rating for this book. All right, guys, thanks for sticking with me. If you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe to see more of my content. In the description below are all the other book reviews that I've done so far this year, and I'll keep updating that as I do more and more book reviews to get my 52 books and 52 weeks in 2023. and I do both book and whiskey reviews. So if you're into that, feel free to check out my whiskey reviews by going and looking at my channel. But for now, you know what to do. I hope you're reading something good and drinking something great. Turn the pages, my friends, and stay thirsty. Cheers.